Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kari, and today I'm going to be talking about 9 reading goals that I have for 2023. So whether you're interested in hearing about what my personal reading goals are for next year, or you're looking for some reading goals to set for yourself next year, stick around because we'll be talking all about reading goals. So my first reading goal is actually in connection to a video that I've already posted, and it's 23 books that I want to read in 2023. So I do plan on reading more than 23 books next year, which I'll get to in a second, but there are 23 books that I'm specifically hoping to read next year, and so I'll link that video down below if you're interested in seeing the 23 books in particular that I'm hoping to read next year. So reading those 23 books is my first particular reading goal of 2023. My second goal is to read 60 books in 2023. So the past few years, with each year that passes, I increased my reading goal by 5 books. So for example, in 2021, my reading goal was 50 books, and then this year in 2022, my reading goal was 55 books, and so next year in 2023, I'm hoping to read 60 books. I just like the idea of pushing myself a little bit further and further every year, and I think increasing by 5 books is a really reasonable increment to be increasing by. So yeah, in 2023, I'm hoping to read 60 books, and 23 of those books will hopefully be those 23 books that I want to read in 2023. And so the way that I keep track of how many books I've read every year is that I keep track on Goodreads, that you can set a reading goal on Goodreads for the entire year, and they keep track for you how many books you've read, and they also keep track of your reading pace. You know, they'll tell you that you're 1 book ahead of schedule, for example, or you're 2 books behind schedule. So it's a really nice motivator to keep you on track. So using this Goodreads goal is something that keeps me motivated to read even more books, which I talk about in a video I just recently posted of tips that I have for you to read more next year. So if you're interested in learning even more about how you can read more next year, I'll link that video down below and you can check that out. My third reading goal is something else that I've been doing for a few years now, and that's to read at least 30 minutes every single day. I find that if I make myself read 30 minutes every single day, I actually end up reading even more than 30 minutes because, you know, if you've been reading for 30 minutes, you get really into the story and you don't want to put it down. So having this goal of 30 minutes actually helps me read even more. You know, maybe I end up reading an hour or even an hour and a half depending how into the story I get. So having this goal of reading a specific amount every day has really helped me read a lot. So if you're looking for ideas of how to read more or how to make reading a habit, I would suggest starting with a goal of reading 10 minutes per day, because like I said, if you just read 10 minutes, you're not going to want to stop at 10 minutes. But if one day you really do want to stop at 10 minutes, you've still achieved that reading goal for the day, and you can feel accomplished about how much you did read because you did meet that goal. But more often than not, you're going to exceed that 10 minutes and you'll get even more reading done than you planned. So yeah, personally, my third reading goal of 2023 is to read at least 30 minutes a day, because this has been one of the goals that I've had the past few years that has really helped me read a lot. My fourth goal for 2023 is to continue with a reading journal. So in 2020 and 2021, I kept up with my reading journal 100%. Like, I'm so proud of my journals for those years. But for 2022, I slacked a little bit, and I really regret that because I love working in my reading journals and looking back on them and keeping all my stats up to date. I just love that, and it's really motivating for me to read even more. And so for 2023, I want to keep up 100% with my reading journal. If you're interested in the spreads and everything that I do in my reading journal, keep an eye out on my channel because I'm going to be filming a reading journal setup video, and you'll be able to see everything that I put into my reading journal and maybe take some inspiration for your own journal. So that video should be coming pretty soon. My fifth goal for 2023 is to read the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist. For the past couple years, I've had a really good time following the Women's Prize for Fiction, and for the past couple of years, I've read almost every book on the shortlist. I think for both of the past 2 years, I haven't read 1 or 2 books on the shortlist. I think 2 years ago, I didn't read 1, and this past year, I didn't read 2. So this year, I would really love to read all of them. I have found some of my favorite books of all time thanks to the Women's Prize for Fiction. For example, 2 years ago, I read Piranesi before anyone was talking about Piranesi online. It was nominated for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I fell in love with it, and it's one of my favorite books of all time now. And this year, I read Sorrow and Bliss, which is also now one of my favorite books of all time. I absolutely loved it. So I know from experience that I'm always going to find something that I absolutely love from the Women's Prize for Fiction. So this year, I really want to commit myself to reading the entire shortlist. My sixth goal for 2023 is something that I really started focusing on this year, and I want to continue working on it next year. And that's to focus on quality books over quantity of books. So usually at the beginning of the year when I set my Goodreads goal, I try to read as many books as possible to give myself this boost at the beginning of the year of the number of books I read. But at the beginning of this year, for example, I started with A Little Life, which is like 800 or 900 pages, because that's something that I wanted to read so badly, but I was kind of putting it off because it was so long, and I was like, I really need to be efficient with my time, you know, to be able to reach my Goodreads goal. I shouldn't be focusing so much time on one book. But because I was focusing on quality over quantity, I started with this huge book for the year. And instead of knocking out a bunch of short books at the beginning of the year, I read this long book and focused a good few, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks that it took me to read A Little Life. But I I absolutely loved it, and again, I found one of my favorite books of all time thanks to this method. Also this year, if you've been watching my channel, you already know that I started reading the A Song of Ice and Fire book series, and almost all of the books in that series are over 1,000 pages. And so instead of being preoccupied with the fact that I could read so many short books in the time it takes me to read one of the 1,000-page A Song of Ice and Fire books, I decided to read those books anyway because that's what I wanted to read. That's what I was really excited about, and I don't regret it. I don't regret that those books slowed me down in my goal because I love them. They're some of my favorite books of all time now. So focusing on quality over quantity this year has really paid off, and I found some really excellent long books, and I'm going to continue focusing on that in 2023. My 7th goal for 2023 is to do some kind of organizational database for my bookshelves. I want to create some kind of database spreadsheet, something like this, of all the books that I own, and to be able to create all different kinds of stats about the books that I have on my bookshelves. I've seen recently that you can buy those scanners and like scan all your books, and that will help you database them. So I'm leaning towards doing that, but I need to look in to see how all that works. Or if I need to, I can just go through manually and manually add all these books to a spreadsheet. I just think it would be really nice and even practical to know exactly which books I have, and like how many in a particular genre do I have, how many classics do I have, how many books published in the 19th century do I have, you know, just little stats like that. I would love to have that information. So creating some kind of database spreadsheet about all my books on my bookshelf, that's on my to-do list for 2023 as well. My 8th goal for 2023 is to read a new to me Brontë sister book. So I've already read Wuthering by Emily and Jane Eyre by Charlotte, and those are two of my favorite classics of all time. I absolutely love both of them. So I would really like to read another Brontë sister book. I think I'm gonna go with The Tenant of Wildfell Hall just so I can read something by Anne, but I'm not gonna box myself into that because maybe I want to read Villette or Shirley or something like this, I don't know. Or even the poetry by Emily. I'm not really sure yet exactly what I want to pick up, but I know for sure I want to read another Brontë sister book. And this goal kind of leads me to my 9th goal, which is to read more classics than I read in 2022. Now 2022 isn't technically over yet, but as of right now, I've read 8 classics in 2022. So let's say that maybe I end up reading one more classic before the end of the year. Okay, I will have read 9 in 2022. Okay, so then that would mean that I need to read at least 10 classics in 2023. So whatever I end up reading by the end of 2022, I need to read at least one more than that in 2023. In 2020, I think almost half of the books that I read were classics, and then in 2021, that number went down a good amount because I started focusing more on literary fiction. And then this year in 2022, it went down even more because I was focusing even more on literary fiction, and I read a lot of thriller and horror this year also. And so next year, especially because I'm bumping my reading goal by 5 books up until 60 books, I have more wiggle room to be adding more classics without sacrificing my literary fiction and my thrillers and my horror. So I think I'm going to look at it as those 5 extra books that I'm going to be reading next year. Just think about adding 5 more classics. All right, so those are my 9 reading goals that I have for 2023. I would love for you to share in the comments what your reading goals are for next year. For example, how many books do you hope to read next year? Or if you have more specific reading goals, I would love to hear those as well. Hearing about other people's reading goals always inspires me to find new goals for myself. So I would love to hear what goals you're going to focus on next year. If you like this video, please give it a like. I would really appreciate it. And subscribe if you haven't already. I would love to have you back. And I'll talk to you again next time. Bye.